Good, beautiful morning and welcome back to Low Drag Lifestyle. So today I want to talk about the stages of culture shock, I guess, and the stages that you will probably go through if you are moving to a new country. There are 5 of these that we're going to get into. Number 5 is one that you want to avoid if at all possible, but I can tell you I've been from 1 to 5 and then I think back to 4. So let's get started and talk about number 1. So number 1 is the honeymoon period. This is the period of your journey into a new society, into a new culture, where everything is exciting, everything is new, everything is interesting. It's when you get off the plane, you go to get the money out, and you've got to figure out what the exchange rate is. It's when you go to the grocery store and you end up thinking, what the heck kind of vegetable is that? I've never seen it before. What do I do with it? It's when you notice the cool things in the street and you think, oh wow, that's just interesting and cool and different from what I've got back home. So the honeymoon period can last a while, but does obviously stop eventually. Everything is not new forever, and eventually this feeling of newness and happiness that you get when you see something new, it wears off. And when you start to see new things, they are no longer just exciting and interesting. They are different, but the way that you approach them and the way that you are dealing with them is a little bit different as time goes on. For me, the honeymoon period probably lasted probably a month, maybe even 2 months. I remember landing in South Korea for the first time, and the first thing I did was I walked into a KFC in the airport. I thought, you know what? I've got years, at least 1 year, to discover Korean culture. I've just got off a very long flight. I want something I know. So I ordered my chicken sandwich, I ordered my chicken burger, went to the counter to pick it up, and I said to the guy behind the counter, do you have any salt? Now, after 3 years in Korea, I can now say that quite happily in fluent Korean. But back then, fresh off the plane, I was stumbling over my words. I had no Korean. I used a translation app and some pictures to ask this guy for salt, and he gave me ketchup. So I'm thinking, oh wow, do they call ketchup salt in Korea? This is so interesting. No, they don't call ketchup salt. I just failed to communicate. But this is one of these experiences that is new and interesting, and even the things like this that can be thought of as negative experiences, little things like not getting salt at KFC, they're enjoyable, they're fun, they're funny, and you have a good time. So the second stage of moving to a new country is what I've heard called negotiation. This is usually accompanied by a couple of bad experiences. Maybe they're bad experiences with communication and something bad's happened because you failed to communicate properly. Maybe they're bad experiences because something you expect to be similar to your own culture and your own country is just not. It's different. And this can certainly cause some bad experiences. And if you're working in your new country, as I am, you can find that workplace culture is very different from country to country, especially if you're traveling vast distances and moving to a really different culture, like I did from the UK to South Korea. I think one important thing to keep in mind when you have these bad experiences, and you will have bad experiences, is that there is a very good chance that to some extent you are at fault. You are to blame for these bad experiences. So maybe you have failed to communicate in some way, and it's because you don't have the language skills yet to properly communicate. Maybe it's because you failed to appreciate some element of the culture of your new country. But for some reason, it may be at least partly your fault. For one thing, as a teacher, I know that I've had some classes where a game or an activity I've designed and made hasn't gone very well. And I have to remind myself that maybe it's because I failed to explain it properly, or maybe the activity I designed just wasn't that good. Either way, if you keep in mind that there's a chance that sometimes negative experiences are at least in part your fault, then moving forward, you can aim to avoid that in the future. So these bad experiences can maybe make you be a little more critical of your new country, your new home. You stop finding everything interesting and fun and nice, and you start to think, oh, this sucks, or that sucks, and you start to not appreciate these things as much. Along with that, you've got the fact that the support network that you had back home doesn't exist anymore. You don't have that. You can't just hang out with a friend. You can't just go around to a family member's house. You're completely separated from the support that you had back home. And with that separation from the networks that you've built and your support networks at home, that's when you start to really feel these differences the most. It's also when you can start to feel the most lonely. Now, if you're lucky, you've been able to hook up with some other people who at least speak your language and are roughly in the same boat as you, and you can have these bad experiences with them and use them as a sounding board to, question things with together and have that discussion. For me, I was really lucky. I had this. When I moved to Korea, I was one of 4 new teachers on my little island. So quite often we would hang out, we would have dinner together. The first few weeks, maybe 2 or 3 nights a week, we would have dinner together. Years later, that completely dwindled out. New people had arrived, some of my friends had left or at least moved to other parts of the country. But when you're in that negotiation period, that second phase of living in a new country, that's when having a new support network, having new friends who you can talk about these things with, that's when that becomes really valuable and really useful. I should say there's a good chance you can hear kids screaming outside. If you can, yes, I'm in my school again in South Korea. We're near the end of the day, so kids are leaving, and I teach in elementary school, so kids scream at each other, I've discovered. The third stage of moving to a new country is one we're going to call adjustment, or the period in which you are adjusting. This is when the cultural differences, the workplace differences that you find, they kind of just become normal. This is the time when, yes, you see something that's different to how it would be in your home country, but in your head, you kind of stop comparing them. And a pro tip, if you want to fast track this process, then start thinking about currencies in your new country's currency straight away as soon as possible. Stop doing that conversion in your head. That's actually one of the things that I heard on maybe my first day living on my little island away from my little introduction week. I was on the bus with a friend from South Africa, and I was saying, oh yeah, this costs this much, which works out to about £2 in the UK. And he said, kind of, let me stop you there. Stop doing that. The sooner you stop comparing every price in your head to the price it is in the UK, the sooner you'll become accustomed to the prices and how things are. And he was right, especially, as I say, if you are earning in that currency, if you're earning and spending in that currency, well, why are you thinking about the currency back home? So let's move on to the fourth phase of living in a new country. This is what we're going to call mastery. You have mastered the art of living in a new country, or specifically of living in your new country. This is when not only do you start to appreciate the differences, but you get really good at dealing with them. Maybe you've picked up some of the language, or you're actively learning the language, and you can use that, and your communications every day become easier. The cultural norms that you're now part of become just that. They become normal. And the way that you live your life just becomes normal. It feels as if you were in your own country because of your routines, because of the way you live your life, but you are now comfortable and happy in your new country. A big part of this is honestly when you figure out how to cook with local ingredients. I had no idea when I turned up just how different the availability of food was going to be in South Korea. In the UK, we import a lot of things. So, for instance, I eat a lot of apples. In the UK, you can get many different varieties of apple all year round. The availability doesn't change. Well, Korea has really great apples, but they vary in quality and price throughout the year. So sometimes I can pay maybe 40% more than I would do at another time of year for a bag of apples. And this is the kind of thing that you come to understand, and it just becomes normal for you as it is for everyone else who lives in that country. The other thing that you might have done by this point is at least got some friends in your new country, or maybe started a relationship if you came there as single with someone from your new country. This is going to again give you another level of appreciation of the new culture. It's going to give you your language skills a challenge as your language skills get better and better, and you communicate far better in that language. Now my language skills are, I'm told I speak good Korean. I know that I don't, and I know people are just being nice, but yeah, I've been here almost 3 years. Of course I speak some Korean. People around here don't really speak English, certainly not publicly anyway, even though there's a big focus on English in education. So speaking the local language, especially if you're living in a community, is a big part of not only you accepting the cultural norms in that community, but also them accepting you as a member of their community. So this fourth stage, this fourth part of culture shock, this fourth part of moving to a new country is the ideal place to be in your experience. It's where you are absolutely comfortable. It's where things are normal. It's where, yes, the culture is completely different potentially to your home country, but you are happy, you are comfortable, you live your life very happily in that culture, and you finally know what to do with all the strange and different vegetables that previously you'd never seen. Folks, before we move on to the fifth stage of living in a new country, let me just tell you that this channel, Low Drag Lifestyle, is about minimalist travel and lifestyle design. If that sounds good, then hit subscribe. I come out with brand new videos every single week. Hit the like button and leave a comment introducing yourself. Okay, let's move on. So let's move on to number 5, the fifth stage of living in a new country. And this is what we're calling checked out. The point at which you are mentally, emotionally checked out of this new experience. This is when you start to become less cooperative, you start to get annoyed more, and you start to, again, really notice not just the differences, but the things you don't like about the differences in these cultures, especially in workplace culture if you're working somewhere. This is when friends invite you out to eat at the local restaurants and you end up thinking, oh, just give me something to eat from back home. This is when some normal kind of workplace practice in your new country that is very different from back home really starts to get under your skin and you become less cooperative. So moving into this fifth stage and mentally and emotionally checking out of your new experience of living in a new country is nothing to be ashamed of. It happens to a lot of people. It happened to me. I got to the stage where I thought, no, I'm done. This sucks. Send me home. In fact, send me just anywhere but here. I think at this point though, the important thing is that if you are aware of it, if you're aware of this fifth stage, this idea that you can move from being perfectly happy and comfortable in your new country to the point where you don't want to be there anymore and you hate it, you can move back, you can get yourself back into the position of mastery, of being happy and enjoying it again. One way that I found to do this is to find something about your new country that you really love and to lean into it. For me, you could say that this was music. I spent the summer of 2019 learning to play a traditional Korean drum from the janitor, the caretaker of our school. At this point, I spoke no Korean and he had very little English. But we were both musicians and we both enjoyed each other's company. He enjoyed teaching me and I enjoyed learning how to play this incredibly difficult instrument. I think I've mentioned it already in one of my videos. Noticing these differences between your new country and your home country can not only mean going, oh wow, look, a difference, isn't that cool? But actively seeking them out and using them to find new ways to appreciate and enjoy your experience there. If you do notice yourself getting to the point where you are emotionally and mentally checked out of your experience, then having the ability to say, yes, I think I can find a way to move back to enjoying it, and looking for ways and mechanisms that can get you back to that stage of mastery, then this is a great goal to have in mind, and certainly something to aim for. So I know a few people who bump into these videos are actually thinking about coming to South Korea. And if that is the case, you might be interested in my video all about the past 3 years I've spent living and working as an English teacher in South Korea. And if that's the case, you can check that video out right here.